Okay. Still got a couple of folks. Hopefully they'll rejoin. What I was saying was that I had the, that I ran the sorted, but it didn't change the list. It just displays it as a sorted list. So you can see that it's still in the original order. Now, what I could do is I could create a new list that way. List 2 equals sorted list 1. And then if I print list 2, the list 2 is actually sorted. So I can sort my lists and keep my original list and get a list that's actually sorted as well. But the sorted command with the ed does not actually change the original list.
So if you change the original list, you put like list 1 equals sorted list 1.
Well, you could do that, but there's another way, and that's what we're going to do now. If you,
Okay.
if I actually want to change the original list, there is a method called sort. So I could say list1 dot sort, and if I just do the sort that way, that will sort it, and so it actually changes the contents of the list. So now you can see it's actually sorted in alphabetical order. Now, the nice thing about that command as well, if I, in the parentheses, put reverse equal true, and it's got to be a capital T and lowercase RUE, and then do it, it does replace the list, but it sorts it in reverse alphabetical order. So if I do the reverse equal true, it will do it in reverse alphabetical order. And that will work with numbers as well. So I can use that method, those methods, to sort numeric lists as well as text lists. Okay, I want to check one thing. I'm going to unshare my screen for just a second. Yeah, okay. Okay. Couple of other things with lists here. You could have lists that with more than one of the same item. I mean, there's nothing that stops that. So I've got Mary in here 3 times now. There is a method called the count method that works with lists. And inside the parentheses of the count, you put what you want to count. So if I want to count the number of occurrences of Mary, I'll say list1.count Mary. And it says, okay, there were 3 instances of Mary. Mary, Mary, and Mary. So if you've got a big list and you want to find out how many Georges there are, or whatever like that, you can use the count method there. Now, there's another thing you can do with the count method. No, I'm sorry, I was not count. I need to get to the next one. I got ahead of myself. There is another method that will tell you where a particular item is in the list, its index. So you use the list.index, and in parentheses of the index, you put what you want to ask for. So if I want to see Joe, Joe is 0, 1, should be element 2. And it does say Joe's in element 2. So the index will search a list to find a particular element. Now, if I want to find Mary, but I don't want to find that first occurrence of Mary,
So to stop on the first occurrence, it will find.
yeah. So let me do just do Mary first. And if I tell it, it says, okay, Mary is at position 1. Let me copy this. I can tell it, okay, start at position 2. So if I put a number, first what I'm searching for, and then a number after a comma, it says start at position 2, the search. And it says, okay, the next Mary is at 3. And I can even give it a stopping point. I won't need to here, but I could say 2, 4, start at position 2 and go up to 4, but don't include 4. And that would tell it just to look at a substring of it. If I wanted the second occurrence of Mary, there's not an easy way I have ever found to do it. But what I can do, is I can tell it, okay, I want the index of Mary, but I want to start it at the list.index of Mary, and the index of Mary returns a numeric value. So list.index Mary returns a numeric value. So if I add 1 to it, that will start 1 after there, and that should get the second occurrence of Mary. And it does, it comes up with a 3. If you need the third one or fourth one, I have not found an easy way of doing that. But the index lets me find or search a list to find specific values. So those are some methods on lists. Questions? Okay. Now we can use lists in a lot of things. And I'm going to create a for loop for x in, and we've done range before. Well, here's a dirty little secret about range. Range, or the range command, actually created a list. And so I can actually say for list 1, or x in list 1, and I'm telling it to start at the beginning of the list and iterate or move through the list. So if I do that and I print x, let me format this. if I run this now, it goes through the list. It starts at the beginning of the list, and each time it goes through the forked loop, it pulls or uses the next element, copies that element into the variable X, copies that element into the variable X, and prints X in this case. So I can work my way or iterate my way through a list by doing that. So if you use the for loop and you say some variable in the list, that will, each time it goes through the list, it pulls off the next item in the list and lets you work with it. So I can go through and iterate through a list that way. Any questions there?
If you were going to try to skip like every other name in the list in the brackets, would it be X comma 2?
Nope. Because X here is not a number. X isn't a number. X is actually the item. So you want to skip an every other one. Okay. Now instead of going through the list or iterating through the list in the for, we got to do it a little bit differently. That's where I would use the length command, and range. So the range of the length of the list, that would go through, starting at element 0, go through the end of the list. And if I run this now, it'll give me the same output, or I'm sorry, it'll give me 1 through 9. No, not 1, 0 through 8, rather. Not 8, 6. The other one had 9 elements. This one has 6 or 7, so 0 through 6, where this is now, X is now the actual index, not the name, the string, where when I just said in list 1, the string. So what I could do is then pull out and say, I've got X, and let's go ahead and put its, put the item in, and that would be list 1 of X, and this would get every item and its index. And so if you wanted every other one from there, what you would need to do is take X, and I guess you could go to the range of the length, half of the length, or you could use an if statement, and if X was even, print it, otherwise not print it. But the range command here, well, actually there's another way, but that would get everyone. I wasn't thinking straight. What I could do if I wanted every other one, go from, instead, start at 0 to the length of the list and increment by 2 each time.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That was, yeah, that sometimes at first I don't think the quickest until I'm talking through it, but yeah, doing it that way. But there you have to use the length of the list and the range.
And if you want your odd number, you start with 1.
Yeah, you could start with 1. And there are times where you need both the index value and you need the item itself. And so if you do need the index value as well as the item, iterating through on a range is probably the best way of doing it.
If you remove the LEN and the parentheses there, would it just give you the names and not the index value next to it?
So you still have the word range?
Yeah, you still have the word range, but in the middle, instead of len, list one, just remove the len and the parentheses.
If you do that, you will get an error. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, you get an error because what it's returning here, this is a list there, not, and that has to be a numeric value.
So if your list contain numeric values, will it still error?
It would still error because you're telling it to stop at the list itself, not an index, not a numeric value. Now, if I had a list that had numbers in it, I could do, say list 2, square brackets, element 4, and whatever the number of element 4 would be. But that, I can't think of a time I would do that. But yeah, if you just have the list in, a list is not a number. And these values, each of these values in the range have to actually be numbers or variables containing a number, an integer. Okay. Now, the last thing I want to do tonight, and a for loop is not the best way to do this, folks. But I want to do it with a for loop, and I'm going to have a range of 4, so it's going to go through the loop 4 times. And I'm going to create just an empty list. Create an empty list, and I need to do that before the for loop. List equals open close square brackets. That creates an empty list. The better way to do this is with a while loop, and we'll get to while loops later on this week. But I can, in here, I can say, let's say, name equals input input a name, and I could do a list one dot append name and tell it to add or append name to it to each one. And then when I exit the list, let's print it. And it's got a squiggly. Wonder why.
You got your brackets.
I've got the brackets. Oh, I don't need the brackets if I'm doing the whole list. Sorry, that's it. Yeah, I don't need if I'm printing the whole list, I don't need the brackets. Okay, so it says enter a name. And so each time it went through, it appended that name, in this case, to the list. And then once I had finished that, finished the list. The reason I say this isn't probably the best way, if I always knew I wanted to enter 4 names, that would be fine. But what if I wanted to enter, I didn't know how many names I was going to enter? Well, if I do know how many names to enter at the beginning, I could actually add an input beforehand. And use count here instead of 4. And if I told it I wanted to enter 3 names, what did I forget to do? I forgot to convert it to an int. We've only been doing that all semester. And it just asked me for 3. So you could do it that way. When we get to while loops, we'll see that we can have an exit condition where you enter a 0 or something like that in order to tell it you want to leave the loop. But that's the basics of working with lists. Now, let's go back to the one that had, I was doing the math on the list. Let me find it real quick. Thought I'd find it. Did we not do one with Max? I bet I wrote over it.
I think it's on number 14.
14. I wrote over it. I forgot to copy and wrote over it. So let's go through and I'll create another list of numbers. I'm supposed to do commas. Learn to hit the keyboard right.
Can you put a space after the commas?
Yes, you can. In fact, they prefer the space after the comma, and I've got, you can't really see it, I'm sure, but I've got the little squiggly, gray squiggly saying it works, but it's not the way you want it. They actually prefer the space. I said we already saw, since I wiped it out, we could get the max and min okay. Sometimes when I'm recording, it's real slow. There it goes. So 8 and 2, the max and the min. But there's also, and now I'm going to give you, if it's not out there, there will be a lab where you need to sum up a list, but it says do not use the sum function. There's actually a sum, and you can use a list, and it will sum up the elements in the list. And so it said it's 30. That sum function can actually work not only with summing up lists, but it could just work with numbers. I could do sum of 1, 5, 7, and that would work as well. But it's most often used with a list, and that is a really nice way if you've got a list of numbers to get the total, rather than have to do a loop to total it up like we've done before. We could total them up in a for loop, and there may be an assignment that tells you to do that in a loop, but there is the sum function that will sum them up as well. If one of the elements is not a number, though, you end up getting a traceback error because all those elements have to be numeric. If any of them, and it doesn't matter if they're a mix of integers and floats, but if you've got any strings in there, then you will get an error if you try to use the max, min, or sum functions. So any questions about lists? When we look at dictionaries and tuples or tuples, I've heard them pronounced both ways, the max, min, and sum, those functions work with tuples as well. With dictionaries, those don't work, but indexes will be similar. So we will get into dictionaries before the end. We'll get into tuples probably right after we do while loops. Any questions?
No, sir.
Huh?
No, sir.
Oh, anybody? I'm going to be doing a session tomorrow for one of the day classes. I think it's my Tuesday, Thursday, 1:30 class. And we're going to basically pick up here or go from here, and we're going to start while loops. So you do want to probably look at that one. And of course, the videos I've already got out there linked that have while loops on them. Any questions? I will post, it'll be 2 videos since we died in the middle of the first one. It did save it, I think. I will post the videos, and it's about to warn me again about the meeting going in. This time it says in 10 minutes, but I don't know what's going on, because the other day it worked that we had the longer meeting. Todd was there, and we never got that, but maybe they've just getting overblown or something, because it did say they did send out an email saying the free version, if you got an EDU email, even with larger groups, would be more than 40 minutes. Questions? And I will post these examples. They're not going to be posted in D2L. There's a link to a shared Google Drive folder. That way I only have to post them once for all 4 classes, because you know me, if I try to do it to all 4 classes, I'm going to forget a class. All right, if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and quit.
The Google Drive link is on D2L?
Huh?
The Google Drive link is on D2L?
If it should, well, I actually think I'd sent them out in an email, but I will go ahead and put the Google Drive link there. I think I sent it out with an email last week, but just in case, I'll put the Drive link. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now and end, and we will do this at 7 again next week. The reason I'm doing 7 is I know some of you are still working, and that hopefully means you don't have to rush straight from work, and you'll have a little more time to grab a bite or something.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Have a good one.